The moment Rebecca Pierce stepped off the train in Jerome, Arizona territory, in the scorching summer of 1883, she knew her father's men would not be far behind. Her silk dress, far too fine for the dusty copper mining town perched precariously on Cleopatra Hill, drew stares from every weathered face on the platform. She clutched a single carpet bag containing everything she had managed to grab before fleeing her father's San Francisco mansion in the dead of night. 23 years of suffocating privilege had finally driven her to desperation. Her father, Charles Pierce, the most powerful banker west of the Mississippi, had arranged her marriage to a railroad magnate twice her age without so much as asking her opinion. The wedding was scheduled for next month, and Rebecca had realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that if she did not run now, she would spend the rest of her life as another piece of property in men's business transactions. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she made her way along the wooden sidewalks, her polished leather boots clicking against the planks. Jerome clung to the mountainside at a 45-degree angle, its buildings stacked haphazardly wherever flat ground could be found. Miners covered in red dust trudged past, their eyes hollow from exhaustion. The smell of smelted copper hung thick in the air, mixing with the scent of horses and the distant promise of rain from clouds gathering over Mingus Mountain. Rebecca had chosen Jerome precisely because it was the sort of place her father would never think to look. He considered mining towns beneath contempt, full of rough men and rougher living. She had overheard him once call such places the refuse bins of civilization. That made it perfect. She needed work, and she needed it quickly. The modest sum she had taken from her jewelry box would not last long, and she refused to use the pearl necklace around her neck unless absolutely necessary. That necklace had been her mother's, the only thing Rebecca had of her since consumption had taken her when Rebecca was just 12 years old. The first saloon she passed, the Golden Nugget, had a handwritten sign in the window advertising for a cook. Rebecca straightened her shoulders and pushed through the doors before she could lose her nerve. The interior was dim and smoky, with a long bar running the length of one wall and tables scattered throughout. A handful of men sat drinking despite the early hour, and all conversation stopped when she entered. "We do not serve ladies here, miss," the bartender said, though his tone was not unkind. He was a portly man with a handlebar mustache and suspicious eyes. "I am not here for service," Rebecca said, willing her voice not to shake. "I saw your advertisement for a cook." The bartender's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. I can cook." This was only partially true. She had helped cook in the kitchen sometimes as a child, before her father had discovered her and forbidden such unseemly behavior. But how hard could it be? "This is not the sort of establishment for a lady of your bearing," he said, and Rebecca heard the dismissal in his tone. She left before the humiliation could fully settle in her chest. The next 3 establishments gave her similar responses, though one saloon owner had looked at her in a way that made her skin crawl before suggesting she might be suited for a different sort of work upstairs. She had fled that place with her cheeks burning. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Rebecca's feet ached, her dress was dusty, and desperation had begun to claw at her throat. She had enough money for perhaps a week at a boarding house, maybe 2 if she was careful. Then what? She found herself at the edge of town where Jerome's buildings gave way to rough country. A small ranch house sat in a relatively flat clearing with a barn and several corrals. Horses moved about in the evening light, beautiful creatures with coats that gleamed. A man worked in one of the corrals with a buckskin mare, his movements fluid and patient as he guided the horse in a circle with nothing but a long rope and quiet words. Rebecca watched, transfixed, as the man worked. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty chaps over worn denim and a brown hat pulled low against the fading sun. There was something almost musical in the way he moved, a conversation between man and horse that needed no translation. The mare, which had been tossing her head and dancing nervously, began to settle. Her ears swiveled forward, focusing on the man. He changed direction and she followed, gradually moving closer to him. After several more minutes, the mare approached him directly, and he raised his hand slowly to her neck, stroking gently. "Well done, girl," he murmured, his voice carrying in the still evening air. "Well done." Rebecca must have made some sound, because both the man and the horse turned toward her. The man had a strong, weathered face that spoke of years under the sun, with startling blue eyes that studied her with curiosity, rather than the leering she had encountered in town. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most. "Can I help you, miss?" he called out, his voice polite but wary. Rebecca stepped closer to the fence. "I apologize for intruding. I was looking for work and saw your ranch." He led the mare to the gate and slipped through, leaving her in the corral. Up close, Rebecca could see the fine lines around his eyes, the dust that covered him from hat to boots, the gentle strength in his calloused hands. There was something inherently decent in his face that made her want to trust him. "I am Yates Morrison," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "This is my place, such as it is. What sort of work are you looking for?" "Anything honest," Rebecca said, then added, "I can cook, clean, handle household tasks." She hesitated, then decided honesty might serve her better than pretense. "I know I do not look like I need the work, but appearances can be deceiving. I left a difficult situation and find myself in need of employment." Yates studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes missing nothing. "You are running from something." It was not a question, so Rebecca did not answer it as one. "I am running toward something, I hope, a life of my own choosing." He nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to him. "I do not have much need for household help, to be honest. I am just one man and I spend most of my time with the horses. But I have been thinking about hiring someone to help with the training. It is slow going doing it all myself." "I do not know anything about horses," Rebecca admitted, "but you want to learn." Again, it was not quite a question. "I want to be useful," she said, "and I am willing to work hard." Yates looked back at the mare in the corral, then at the other horses scattered across his property. "Tell you what, I will give you a trial. Room and board in the cabin behind the barn, plus wages if it works out. Fair warning, though, it is not easy work and I expect honest effort." Relief flooded through Rebecca so intensely she felt dizzy. "Thank you. You will not regret this." "We will see about that," Yates said, but there was a hint of warmth in his voice. "What should I call you?" She hesitated only a moment. "Rebecca. Just Rebecca. For now, if that is acceptable." He nodded, asking no further questions, and she felt a surge of gratitude for his discretion. "Come on then, Rebecca. Let me show you where you will be staying." The cabin was small but clean, with a wood stove, a bed, a table with 2 chairs, and little else. To Rebecca, who had grown up in a mansion with 12 bedrooms, it looked like paradise. It was hers. She could lock the door and no one would tell her what to do, who to marry, how to live. "It is not much," Yates said, standing in the doorway. "It is perfect," Rebecca said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. He showed her where the well was, where she could wash up, told her to come to the main house for breakfast at dawn. Then he left her alone, and Rebecca sat on the bed and cried for the first time since she had fled San Francisco. They were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. The next morning, Rebecca woke before dawn, roused by the unfamiliar sounds of roosters and the distant whinny of horses. She had slept in her chemise, having no nightgown, and dressed quickly in the same traveling suit she had worn the day before. She would need to acquire some more practical clothing, and soon. Yates was already up, coffee brewing on his stove when she knocked on his door. His house was simple but comfortable, the home of a man who valued function over form. Books lined one wall, which surprised her. She had not expected a horse trainer to be a reader. "Morning," he said, gesturing her inside. "Coffee, please." He poured her a cup, and she took it gratefully. The coffee was strong and hot, nothing like the delicate tea she had grown up with, and she loved it immediately. "I make a simple breakfast," Yates said. "Eggs, bacon, biscuits if I am feeling ambitious. Today is an ambitious day." He set to work with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. "You said you could cook." "I may have overstated my abilities," Rebecca admitted. He glanced at her with a slight smile. "Honesty. I appreciate that. Well, you will learn. Out here you learn or you go hungry." They ate together as the sun began to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Yates explained his operation between bites. He bought horses, mostly wild mustangs or rough stock, and trained them for sale. Some became working ranch horses, others went to the cavalry, still others to private buyers who wanted a good, steady mount. "The key is patience," he said. "Too many people try to break a horse, force it to submit. That is not training, that is brutality. A horse that wants to work with you is worth 10 that fear you." Rebecca listened, fascinated. "Is that what you were doing yesterday? With the mare?" "That was the beginning, building trust, showing her I am not a threat. It takes time, but it creates a partnership instead of servitude." He looked at her directly. "Same is true of people, I imagine." She felt her cheeks warm at his meaning. "I will earn my keep, Mr. Morrison." "Yates," he corrected. "And I believe you. Now let me show you the operation." The ranch was larger than it appeared from the road. Yates had several corrals, a good-sized barn and pasture island that stretched back into the hills. He owned 20 horses at present, in various stages of training. Some were still quite wild, others nearly ready for sale. "The work is feeding, watering, mucking stalls, mending tack, and helping me with training when needed," Yates explained. "It is physical labor. Your hands will blister before they callous. You will ache in places you did not know could ache. Are you certain you want this?" Rebecca looked at the horses, at the vast sky stretching overhead, at the mountains rising in the distance. She thought of her father's mansion, the parlors and ballrooms where she had been displayed like a prize doll, the endless social calls and empty conversations. She thought of the railroad magnate's cold eyes when her father had introduced them. "I am certain," she said. The first week was every bit as hard as Yates had warned. Rebecca's soft hands blistered, then bled, then blistered again. Her back ached from hauling water and hay. She fell into bed each night too exhausted to do anything but sleep, and woke each morning to do it all again. But something was changing inside her. Each task completed, no matter how small, was a victory she had earned herself. When she successfully mucked out a stall without gagging, she felt proud. When she learned to approach the gentler horses without spooking them, she felt accomplished. When Yates nodded his approval at work well done, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. Yates was a patient teacher, never mocking her ignorance or her mistakes. When she filled a water trough only to realize she had left the gate open and the horses had wandered out, he simply helped her round them up and showed her how to properly secure the gate. When she put the bridle on backward, he corrected her gently. When she cried in frustration after dropping an entire bucket of oats, he said nothing, just brought her another bucket and squeezed her shoulder briefly before walking away. By the end of the second week, Rebecca's hands were developing calluses. She had purchased 2 simple work dresses and a split riding skirt from a widow in town, along with practical boots. She had also learned to make Yates's coffee just the way he liked it, strong enough to strip paint, and had even managed to produce an edible batch of biscuits. "You are learning fast," Yates commented one morning as they worked side by side, repairing a section of fence. "Where did you say you were from?" "I did not say," Rebecca replied, then softened her tone. "California, city girl." "Yes. What did your family do?" Rebecca hammered a nail with more force than necessary. "Business, banking." Yates was quiet for a moment. "They do not know where you are." Again, not quite a question. "No, they will look for you, perhaps." She set down the hammer and looked at him directly. "Will that be a problem?" He met her gaze steadily. "Not for me, but you should know what you are facing. Men like that, men with money and power, they do not take kindly to losing their property." "I am not property," Rebecca said fiercely. "I know that. Does your father?" The question hit too close to the truth. Rebecca turned back to the fence, blinking away sudden tears. "He thinks my purpose is to further his business interests. He arranged a marriage for me without asking what I wanted. The man he chose is wealthy, connected, and 47 years old. He looks at me like I am another acquisition for his portfolio." "So you ran." "So I ran," she confirmed. Yates picked up his hammer again, but said, "For what it is worth, I think you are brave." Those simple words, spoken without fanfare or drama, meant more to Rebecca than any of the flowery compliments she had received in San Francisco ballrooms. This man, who barely knew her, saw her as brave. Not disobedient, not foolish, not ungrateful. Brave. "Thank you," she whispered. They worked in comfortable silence after that, and Rebecca marveled at how companionable it was. She had grown up in a house full of servants and visitors, yet had always felt alone. Here, in the quiet company of this cowboy and his horses, she felt less alone than she ever had. That evening, Yates invited her to watch him work with the buckskin mare, whose name was Honey. Rebecca sat on the corral fence, her new split skirt making it possible to sit astride without impropriety, and watched as Yates moved through the training process. He had begun putting a saddle blanket on Honey's back, letting her grow accustomed to the weight and feel of it. The mare was nervous, dancing sideways, but Yates's calm persistence gradually won out. He would put the blanket on, let her move around with it, take it off. Again and again, always patient, always gentle, always talking to her in that low, soothing voice. "Why do you talk to her so much?" Rebecca asked during a break. "Horses are like people," Yates said, stroking Honey's neck. "They need to know they are seen, that they matter. The words do not mean much to her, but the tone does. She knows I am calm, that I am not angry or impatient. That helps her stay calm too." "You really care about them, of course. They are not just livestock to me. Each one has a personality, fears, strengths. Honey here is brave but sensitive. Push her too hard and she will shut down, but give her time and she will give you everything she has." He looked at Rebecca over the mare's back. "A lot like some people I know." Rebecca felt her heart skip strangely at the warmth in his eyes. She looked away, suddenly flustered. "I should start dinner." "Rebecca," she paused, one foot off the fence, "you are doing good work here, real work. I want you to know that." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and hurried toward the cabin. Inside, she leaned against the closed door and pressed her hands to her warm cheeks. What was happening to her? She had known Yates for only 2 weeks, yet his good opinion mattered to her more than any of the society matrons who had judged her back home. His presence made her feel safe and seen in a way she had never experienced. This was foolishness, she told herself firmly. She had come here to escape one man's plans for her life. She could not afford to become entangled with another, no matter how kind his eyes or gentle his hands. But as the days turned into weeks, Rebecca found herself increasingly drawn to Yates. She loved watching him work with the horses, the patience and understanding he brought to each interaction. She loved their morning coffee conversations, where they would talk about everything and nothing. She loved the way he listened when she spoke, really listened as if her thoughts and opinions mattered. He taught her to ride, starting her on Clover, an older mare with a gentle disposition. The first time Rebecca sat astride a horse, she felt a thrill of terror and exhilaration. The ground seemed impossibly far away, and the power of the animal beneath her was both frightening and magnificent. "Easy," Yates said, walking beside her with his hand on the bridle. "Just sit deep, breathe, and feel how she moves. Let your body move with hers, not against her." It took several tries, and Rebecca bounced uncomfortably for the first few circuits of the corral, certain she would fall at any moment. But gradually, she began to understand what Yates meant. She relaxed into Clover's rhythm, letting her hips follow the motion instead of fighting it. "There you go," Yates said, and the pride in his voice made Rebecca glow with pleasure. "You are a natural." By early September, Rebecca could ride well enough to help Yates move the horses between pastures. She had learned to check their hooves for stones, to brush their coats until they shone, to read the subtle signs of illness or injury. Her hands were thoroughly calloused now, her skin tanned despite her bonnet, her body strong from the constant physical work. She felt more herself than she had ever felt in her entire life. One evening, as they sat on Yates's porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, he said, "Tell me something about your old life. Something good." Rebecca considered. "My mother used to sneak me down to the kitchens when I was small. She would teach me to make tea cakes while cook pretended not to notice. Mother would get flour on her nose, and we would laugh until father found us and sent me back to the nursery." She smiled at the memory. She was not supposed to do such things. It was beneath her station. But she did it anyway because it made her happy, made me happy too. "She sounds like she was a good mother." "She was. I miss her every day." Rebecca pulled her shawl closer against the cooling air. "What about you? Tell me something about your life before this." Yates was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening landscape. "I grew up on a ranch in Texas. My father raised cattle, expected me to follow in his footsteps. But I was always more interested in the horses than the cattle. Father thought that was foolish, said there was no money in training horses. We fought about it for years. What happened? I left when I was 19. Came west, worked on various ranches, learned everything I could about horses, saved every penny until I could buy this place 5 years ago." He glanced at her. "My father and I have not spoken since I left. I write to my mother, but he will not read my letters. I am sorry. Do not be. I chose this life knowing the cost. No one forced me to leave. That is the difference between us, I suppose. You ran from something. I ran toward something." "Maybe we both did both," Rebecca said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Rebecca felt her breath catch at the intensity in his blue eyes. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might close the small distance between them. Her heart hammered in anticipation and fear and longing all tangled together, but he looked away, clearing his throat. "It is getting late. We have an early morning tomorrow." Rebecca tried to hide her disappointment. "Yes, of course. Good night, Yates." "Good night, Rebecca." She lay awake in her cabin long into the night, listening to the coyotes sing in the hills and wondering what was happening between her and the quiet cowboy who had given her refuge. She had fled San Francisco to escape an unwanted marriage, to claim her independence. Getting involved with Yates, developing feelings for him, seemed like a betrayal of that hard-won freedom. But her heart had its own ideas, and it was increasingly clear that her heart wanted Yates Morrison. The following week brought the first real test of Rebecca's new life. She had gone into town for supplies, something she had done several times without incident. But as she emerged from the general store, packages in her arms, she heard a voice that turned her blood to ice. "Miss Pierce." She knew before she turned that her father had found her. The man standing on the sidewalk was not Charles Pierce himself, but Robert Hammond, her father's head of security. Hammond was a tall, cold-eyed man who had worked for her father for 15 years. "Mr. Hammond," Rebecca said, proud that her voice remained steady. "I am afraid you have mistaken me for someone else." "I think not, Miss Pierce. Your father has been very worried about you. As I said, you are mistaken." Rebecca tried to move past him, but he stepped into her path. "Your father sent me to bring you home. There is a train leaving tomorrow morning. I have already purchased your ticket." "I am not going anywhere with you," Rebecca said firmly, though fear clawed at her throat. Hammond had always frightened her. There was something calculating in the way he looked at people, as if assessing their weaknesses. "Miss Pierce, please do not make this difficult. You are young and confused. This little rebellion has gone on long enough. Your fiancé has been very patient, but even his patience has limits. The wedding has been postponed twice already. I am not marrying him. I am not going back." Hammond's expression hardened. "You are Charles Pierce's daughter. You have responsibilities. Your father has invested a great deal in your future, and you will not throw that away for some childish fantasy." "My life is not my father's investment," Rebecca said, anger overriding fear. "I am 23 years old, and I choose how I live." "You are a woman alone in a rough town," Hammond said coldly. "Anything could happen to you. Terrible things happen to women without protection in places like this." The threat was unmistakable, and Rebecca felt her courage waver. But before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "The lady said she is not interested." Yates stood a few feet away, his stance relaxed but his eyes hard. He had been at the feed store, and Rebecca had never been so glad to see anyone in her entire life. Hammond sized up Yates with a glance that was meant to be dismissive. "This is a private matter. I suggest you move along, Cowboy." "I suggest you move along," Yates said evenly. "The lady does not want to talk to you. Do you know who her father is?" "I know who she is. That is all that matters." Hammond's expression turned ugly. "You are harboring the daughter of Charles Pierce. He will not take kindly to that. He could destroy you with a telegram." "Maybe so," Yates said, "but he would have to find a telegraph office that cares. Last I checked, Arizona territory was a bit outside San Francisco's jurisdiction." He stepped closer to Rebecca. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said gratefully. "You want to go with this man?" "Absolutely not." Yates nodded and turned back to Hammond. "You heard the lady. Time for you to go." Hammond's hand moved toward his jacket, and Rebecca saw the bulge of a gun. But Yates saw it too, and his own hand dropped to the revolver at his hip with practiced ease. He did not draw it, but the threat was clear. "I would not do that if I were you," Yates said quietly. "This is the West, friend. Things work a little differently out here. A man draws on another man without cause. People tend to side with whoever is left standing." For a long moment, Hammond looked as if he might draw anyway. But something in Yates's eyes, a hardness that suggested he was no stranger to violence despite his gentle demeanor with horses, made him reconsider. "This is not over," Hammond said to Rebecca. "Your father will not stop looking for you." "Let him look," Rebecca said, finding her courage again with Yates beside her. "I am not going back." Hammond stared at them both for another moment, then turned and stalked away. Rebecca felt her knees go weak, and Yates took her elbow, steadying her. "Come on," he said gently. "Let us get you home." They rode back to the ranch in Yates's wagon, Rebecca's supplies loaded in the back. She was trembling, the encounter having shaken her more than she wanted to admit. "He threatened you," she said quietly. "My father could really destroy your business. He has influence everywhere. I am not worried about your father. You should be. He is a powerful man, Yates. He is used to getting what he wants." Yates glanced at her. "So am I." When they reached the ranch, Yates helped her down from the wagon and did not release her hand immediately. "Rebecca, tell me the truth. Are you safe here? Is your father the kind of man who would send people to take you by force?" Rebecca thought about her father, about his ruthless business practices, his conviction that he always knew best. "I do not know," she admitted. "He has always been controlling, but I have never defied him like this before. I do not know what he will do." Yates nodded slowly. "Then we should be prepared. I have a rifle in the house and I am a decent shot, but maybe we should let the sheriff know what is going on." "The sheriff?" "Sam Foster. He is a good man, Fair. If your father's people try anything, it would be good to have the law aware of the situation." They went into town the next day and explained the situation to Sheriff Foster, a middle-aged man with a lined face and shrewd eyes. He listened carefully, asked a few pointed questions, and then nodded. "I will keep an eye out," he said. "And I will make sure folks know that Rebecca here is under my protection, so to speak. Your father's man shows up again making threats, I will have a word with him. Nobody gets to threaten people in my town. I do not care how much money they have back in California." The sheriff's support eased some of Rebecca's fears, but she still found herself looking over her shoulder for the next week, expecting Hammond or her father himself to appear. But the days passed without incident, and gradually she began to relax again. Yates had grown more protective, she noticed. He insisted on accompanying her into town for supplies. He taught her to shoot, spending several afternoons setting up targets and showing her how to handle his spare revolver. Rebecca had never held a gun before, and the weight of it in her hand felt strange and powerful. "It is not about wanting to hurt someone," Yates explained as he positioned her stance. "It is about having options. If you can defend yourself, you do not have to be afraid." Under his patient instruction, Rebecca learned to load, aim, and fire with reasonable accuracy. The first time she hit the center of the target, Yates let out a whoop of approval that made her laugh despite her nervousness. "You are a natural," he said, grinning at her in a way that made her heart flutter. "I have a good teacher." Their eyes met and held, and Rebecca felt the air between them grow charged with something electric. Yates reached up, almost unconsciously, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek for just a moment, and Rebecca leaned into the touch before she could stop herself. "Rebecca," he said softly, his voice rough with something she could not quite name. "Yes." But whatever he had been about to say was lost as Honey whinnied loudly from her corral, breaking the moment. Yates stepped back, clearing his throat, and the spell was broken. Rebecca felt the loss of his touch like a physical thing. That night, unable to sleep, she sat on her cabin's small porch and stared up at the vast expanse of stars. The sky out here was nothing like the sky in San Francisco, where city lights dimmed the heavens. Here, the Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light, and she could see thousands of stars she had never known existed. "Cannot sleep." She turned to find Yates approaching, 2 cups in his hands. He offered her one, and she smelled the cocoa, rich and sweet. "Too much on my mind," she admitted, taking the cup gratefully. He sat beside her on the step, their shoulders nearly touching. "Want to talk about it?" "I am trying to figure out what happens next," Rebecca said. "I cannot hide forever. Eventually, my father will find me, or I will have to face him. And then what? Does he drag me back to San Francisco? Do I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Or you could build a life so good, so solid that it does not matter what he does, Yates said. You could become someone who does not need his money or his approval, someone who is happy with what she has built for herself. Is that possible? For someone like me? Someone like you, Yates repeated. Rebecca, you have worked harder in the last 2 months than most people I know. You came here with soft hands and fancy dresses, and you learned every task I gave you. You learned to ride, to work with horses, to take care of yourself. You are not the same person who stepped off that train in July. Can you not see that? Rebecca looked down at her calloused hands, at the practical dress she wore, at the scuffed boots that had replaced her polished leather ones. He was right. She had changed. She was stronger now, more capable, less afraid. I see it, she whispered. But sometimes I am still terrified that it is not enough, that my father will take it all away. He cannot take away who you have become, Yates said firmly. That is yours, Rebecca. No matter what happens, you know now that you can survive on your own. You know you are strong enough. Nobody can take that from you. She looked at him, at this man who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had taught her to work and ride and shoot, who had stood up to her father's man without hesitation. This man who looked at her like she was strong and capable and brave, not delicate and decorative and useless. Thank you, she said, for everything, for giving me this chance. Best decision I ever made, Yates said, and the sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their cocoa and watching the stars, and Rebecca felt a peace settle over her that she had never experienced before. Whatever came next, whatever challenges she would face, she was not alone. She had found something here in Jerome, Arizona territory, that she had been missing her entire life. She had found herself. And maybe, just maybe, she had found something else too. October brought cooler weather and brilliant fall colors to the mountains surrounding Jerome. The aspens turned gold, standing out bright against the evergreens. Yates had several horses ready for sale, including Honey, who had progressed beautifully in her training. I hate to see her go, Rebecca admitted as she brushed the mare's golden coat. She has become a favorite of mine. She is a good horse, Yates agreed. She will make someone very happy, but that is the business. We train them and let them go. Does it ever get easier? Not really. But it helps to know you are giving them a good start. A horse I train will be treated well because it is well trained. That matters. A rancher came that afternoon to look at Honey and 2 other horses. Rebecca watched from the barn as Yates demonstrated what each horse could do, his obvious skill and knowledge on display. The rancher, a gruff man named Wilson, nodded approvingly and agreed to buy all 3 at Yates's asking price. You have a good operation here, Wilson said as he counted out the payment. I will recommend you to others. After Wilson left with the horses, Yates caught Rebecca's arm and pulled her into an impulsive spin. Did you see that? 3 sales at once. This is a good day. Rebecca laughed, dizzy from the spin and from his proximity. It is because you are good at what you do. We are good at what we do, he corrected. You are part of this operation now, Rebecca. You have earned it. His hands were on her waist, steadying her from the spin, and neither of them moved to break the contact. They stood in the barn doorway, the autumn sunlight slanting through, and Rebecca felt as if they were the only 2 people in the world. Yates, she said softly. I know, he said. I know we should not. I know you came here to be independent, to escape men making decisions for you. I know you are not looking for this. What if I am? The words were out before she could stop them. His eyes widened slightly. What? What if I am looking for this? Rebecca said, heart pounding. Not someone to take care of me or make decisions for me, but someone to be partners with. someone who sees me as an equal. What if I am looking for that? Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying I have feelings for you, Rebecca said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know it is probably foolish and complicated and a terrible idea, but I cannot help it. Being with you, working beside you, learning from you, it has been the happiest I have ever been. And I think maybe it is not just because of the work or the freedom. I think maybe it is because of you. Yates stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, slow and warm and beautiful. Rebecca Pierce, I have been half in love with you since you showed up at my fence in that ridiculous silk dress asking for work. Watching you grow stronger and more confident these past months has been the greatest privilege of my life. So yes, I would very much like to be partners with you, in every sense of the word. And then he was kissing her, and Rebecca was kissing him back, and everything she had been holding back for months came pouring out in that kiss. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, and for a moment there was nothing but this, nothing but them, nothing but the feeling of finally coming home. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. I do not have much to offer you, he said. This ranch, my skills, my heart, that is about it. I cannot give you the life you grew up with. I do not want that life, Rebecca said fiercely. I want this one. I want you and this ranch and these horses and this beautiful, difficult, wonderful life we are building together. Even if your father never forgives you, even if you lose your inheritance, especially then, because it will be mine, ours, something we built with our own hands. He kissed her again, softer this time, tender and promising. Then I guess we are partners. Partners, Rebecca agreed, and the word felt like a vow. They told no one at first, wanting to keep their newfound happiness private for a while, but it was hard to hide the change between them. They worked side by side with new awareness, every accidental touch charged with meaning. They lingered over morning coffee, talking and laughing and simply being together. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, Yates's arm around Rebecca's shoulders, her head on his chest. I never knew it could be like this, Rebecca said one evening. So easy and comfortable. It is supposed to be, Yates said, pressing a kiss to her hair. When it is right, it is supposed to feel like coming home. Winter arrived in the high country, bringing cold nights and occasional snow. Yates taught Rebecca how to winterize the ranch, preparing the horses and buildings for the harsh weather ahead. They worked together to insulate the barn, to stock extra hay and feed, to ensure the water troughs did not freeze. On Christmas Eve, Yates surprised Rebecca by decorating a small pine tree he had cut from the mountainside. He strung it with popcorn and dried apples and topped it with a star he had carved from wood. I know it is not what you are used to, he said, looking almost shy. It is perfect, Rebecca said, tears stinging her eyes. Better than all the elaborate trees we had in San Francisco. Because you made it for me. He handed her a wrapped package, and she opened it to find a pair of leather work gloves, beautifully made and clearly expensive. Your hands have been getting cold in the mornings, he explained. I wanted you to have proper gloves. Rebecca clutched the gloves to her chest, overwhelmed. No gift had ever meant more to her because it showed that he paid attention, that he noticed what she needed and cared about her comfort. I have something for you too, she said, pulling out her own package. She had spent weeks on it, working in secret whenever Yates was occupied elsewhere. He unwrapped it to find a vest she had sewn, made from a length of dark wool she had purchased in town. It was not perfect by any means, her sewing skills being rudimentary at best, but she had put her whole heart into every stitch. Rebecca, he said, running his fingers over the slightly uneven seams. You made this for me. I know it is not very good. I am not much of a seamstress." "It is the best gift I have ever received," he said firmly, and pulled it on immediately. "Look at that, fits perfectly. You must have some seamstress skills after all." They spent that Christmas Eve in front of the fire, Yates playing the harmonica while Rebecca sang softly. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their plans for the ranch. And when the fire burned low, Yates walked her to her cabin and kissed her good night with a tenderness that made her ache. "I love you," he said, the words simple and sure. "I love you too," Rebecca replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. January brought bitter cold and a letter that changed everything. Rebecca had given the general store her name and location so that mail could reach her. And one afternoon the storekeeper handed her an envelope with her father's handwriting. She almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity and perhaps some lingering sense of duty made her carry it back to the ranch. Yates found her sitting at her cabin table, staring at the envelope as if it might explode. "Is that from him?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "You want me to stay while you read it, please?" With shaking hands, Rebecca opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of expensive stationery. "Rebecca, I have allowed this foolishness to continue long enough in hopes that you would come to your senses on your own. Clearly, that was overly optimistic on my part. Let me be clear about your situation. If you do not return to San Francisco by the end of this month, I will cut you off completely. You will receive nothing from me, now or ever. No support, no inheritance, no acknowledgement as my daughter. Your marriage to Harrison Caldwell has been indefinitely postponed, though he has graciously indicated he might still be willing to proceed if you return immediately and apologize for your behavior. You have 10 days to decide what kind of future you want. A life of privilege and security in San Francisco, or poverty and obscurity as a ranch hand in Arizona. I expect to see you at the train station no later than January 30th. Your father, Charles Pierce. Rebecca set the letter down with trembling hands. Yates read it over her shoulder, his jaw tight. "He is giving you an ultimatum," Yates said. "Yes. What are you going to do?" Rebecca looked up at him, at this man who had shown her what it meant to be seen and valued for who she was, not what she represented. She thought about the life her father was offering, the security and wealth and ease. She thought about the life she had built here, the calloused hands and aching muscles and early mornings and hard work. There was no contest. "I am going to write him back," she said, pulling out a sheet of paper. "And then I am never going to think about his money or his approval again." With Yates watching, Rebecca composed her response. "Father, thank you for your letter and for making my choices so clear. I will not be returning to San Francisco, not at the end of this month or ever. I have found a life here that is meaningful and good, and I have no desire to exchange it for the gilded cage you are offering. I am sorry that you cannot understand my decision. I am sorry that you value business connections more than my happiness. But I am no longer a child you can control with threats and ultimatums. I release you from any obligation to me. I want nothing from you now or ever. Consider me no longer your daughter if that is your wish. I will make my own way in this world, and I will do it on my own terms. I wish you well, but I do not wish to hear from you again." Rebecca, she sealed the letter before she could second-guess herself and handed it to Yates. "Will you post this for me tomorrow? Are you certain?" he asked. "This is final, Rebecca. Once you send this, there is no going back. I know." "I am certain." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Then I will post it, and whatever happens next, we will face it together." Rebecca clung to him, allowing herself to feel the grief of losing her father, the fear of an uncertain future, the relief of finally making her choice. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were dry but determined. "I want to be your partner," she said. "Officially, I want to invest in this ranch, help expand it. I have a little money and I can work. We can build something real together." "You are certain?" Yates asked. "This is a hard life, Rebecca. We will struggle sometimes. We will work ourselves to exhaustion. There will be lean years." "I know. I want it anyway. I want you in this life and whatever comes with it." He kissed her then, deep and promising. "Then let us build something together." Over the next weeks, they planned their future. Rebecca used the remainder of her personal funds to purchase additional stock and supplies. They decided to expand the operation, taking on more horses and building additional corrals. Yates taught Rebecca everything he knew about training, and her natural patience and gentleness with the animals proved invaluable. Word spread about Morrison Ranch and the quality of horses they produced. Buyers came from across the territory, and business grew steadily. Rebecca kept the books, managed the business correspondence, and handled sales when Yates was working with horses. They made a good team, their skills complementing each other perfectly. In March, Yates proposed properly, going down on one knee in the barn where they had shared their first kiss. The ring was simple, a single garnet set in silver, and Rebecca loved it more than any diamond. "I know we are already partners," Yates said, "but I want to make it official. Rebecca Pierce, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the person I build this life with?" "Yes," Rebecca said through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married in April by the Justice of the Peace in Jerome, with Sheriff Foster and his wife serving as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress she had made herself and carried wildflowers Yates had picked that morning. It was nothing like the elaborate society wedding her father had planned, and it was absolutely perfect. That night in the cabin they would now share, Yates held her close and whispered, "I promise to always see you, to always value you as an equal, to always support your dreams." "I promise the same," Rebecca whispered back. "Partners in everything." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a celebration of everything they had built together and everything that was still to come. Yates was gentle and patient, making sure Rebecca felt loved and cherished. And when she fell asleep in his arms, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. They expanded the ranch, building a larger house to accommodate the family they hoped to have someday. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years, and worked through lean ones. They built a reputation across the territory for producing the finest trained horses available. Rebecca never heard from her father again. She learned through a letter from an old friend in San Francisco that he had indeed cut her off, telling everyone that his daughter had died. The news hurt, but it did not break her. She had her own life now, her own family, her own purpose. In the spring of 1885, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Michael, after Yates's grandfather. Holding her son in her arms, looking into his tiny, perfect face, Rebecca felt a completion she had never known was possible. "He has your eyes," Yates said, gazing down at them both with such love that Rebecca's heart ached. "And your stubbornness, I expect," Rebecca said with a laugh. "He is going to grow up knowing he is free to choose his own path," Yates said seriously. "We will never force him into a life he does not want." "Never," Rebecca agreed. Michael was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Sarah, and then 3 years after that by another son, Thomas. The ranch house filled with the sounds of children's laughter, and Rebecca marveled daily at the richness of her life. She taught her children to work with the horses, to value honest labor, to treat all people with respect regardless of their station. She taught Sarah that women could be strong and independent, that they did not need to wait for men to give them permission to live their lives. She taught her sons that gentleness was not weakness, that patience was strength, that how you treated those with less power than you defined your character. Yates was a wonderful father, patient and loving and present in a way Rebecca's own father had never been. He taught the children to ride, to train horses, to read the weather and the land. He played with them in the evenings, told them stories, made them laugh. And he loved Rebecca with a constancy that never wavered, through the exhausting years of young children and the challenges of building a business and all the thousand small trials of daily life. You ever regret it? He asked her one evening when they were alone on the porch, the children finally asleep. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had stayed in San Francisco? Rebecca looked out at the ranch they had built together, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the life they had created through hard work and love. She thought about the woman she had been when she stepped off that train 10 years ago, frightened and alone and desperate. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You showed me what riches really mean, Yates, not money or status or social position, but this. A life built with your own hands, work that matters, children who are free to be themselves, a partner who sees you as an equal." She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You showed me that the richest life is one where you choose your own path, even when that path is hard. Where you are valued for who you are, not what you represent. Where you love and are loved in return." "I am the lucky one," Yates said, pulling her close. "You took a chance on me on this life. You left everything you knew to become a cowboy's wife. That takes courage." "We both took a chance," Rebecca corrected, "and it paid off better than either of us could have imagined." They sat together as the stars came out, just as they had on so many evenings before. The children were safe in their beds, the horses were settled in their corrals, and the ranch was quiet and peaceful. It was not the life Rebecca had been born to, but it was the life she had chosen. And that made all the difference. As the years continued to pass, the Morrison Ranch became one of the most respected horse training operations in Arizona Territory. Michael, Sarah, and Thomas grew up strong and capable, each developing their own relationship with the horses and the land. Michael showed particular aptitude for the training work, following in his father's footsteps with the same patience and gentleness. Sarah had a gift for the business side, keeping books and negotiating sales with a sharp mind that reminded Yates of Rebecca. Thomas loved the land itself, spending hours exploring the mountains and learning every plant and animal that called them home. Rebecca and Yates worked side by side for decades, their partnership deepening with each passing year. They added to the house as their family grew, built new barns and corrals, expanded their pasture land. They weathered the transition when Arizona became a state in 1912, celebrated when their children married and started families of their own, mourned together when old friends passed away. In the evenings, they would still sit on their porch and watch the sunset, Yates's arm around Rebecca's shoulders, her head on his chest. They would talk about their day, their children, their grandchildren, their memories. And Rebecca would marvel at the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. "I was so scared that day I got off the train," she said once, when they were both well into their 60s. "I had no idea what I was doing." "You were the bravest person I ever met," Yates replied, "and you still are." "We did good, did we not?" Rebecca asked, looking out at the ranch that had been their life's work. "We did better than good," Yates said. "We built something that will outlast us, not just this ranch but the values we taught our children. The way we showed them that love and partnership and honest work matter more than money or status. That is what will endure." Rebecca thought about her father, dead now for many years, and wondered if he had ever regretted his choices. She liked to think that maybe, at the end, he had realized that in trying to control her, he had lost her. That love could not be commanded or purchased, only given freely. She had sent him one final letter when Michael was born, with a photograph of her son and an invitation to be part of his grandson's life. The letter had been returned unopened. After that, Rebecca had made peace with the loss and moved forward with the family she had chosen. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were 15 grandchildren by then, ranging from babies to young adults, and the house overflowed with noise and laughter and love. Rebecca, her hair now completely gray but her eyes still bright, stood with Yates and looked at the family they had created. 50 years, Yates said, shaking his head in wonder. Seems like yesterday you showed up at my fence in that silk dress. Best decision I ever made, Rebecca said, asking you for work. Best decision I ever made was saying yes. Their children made speeches, thanking them for the example they had set, for the values they had instilled, for the love they had shown not just to each other but to everyone around them. Michael spoke of his father's patience and integrity. Sarah spoke of her mother's courage and strength. Thomas spoke of how they had taught him that a life of meaning was worth more than a life of ease. As the sun set over the mountains that evening, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Rebecca stood surrounded by the people she loved most in the world. Her children, her grandchildren, the man who had been her partner through 50 years of joy and struggle and growth. She thought about the woman she had been, the banker's daughter who had run from wealth because she wanted to be more than someone's property. She thought about what that terrified young woman would think if she could see this moment, this life, this richness that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love and choice and freedom. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked softly, coming to stand beside her. "I am thinking that you were right," Rebecca said. "You showed me what riches really mean, and I am the wealthiest woman in the world." He kissed her temple gently. "We are both pretty rich." "Yes," Rebecca agreed, taking his hand. "Yes, we are." They stood together as the stars began to emerge, surrounded by the life they had built and the love they had nurtured. And Rebecca knew that if she had to make the choice again, she would make it exactly the same way. She would step off that train in Jerome, Arizona territory, and walk toward the unknown. She would take a chance on the quiet cowboy with the kind eyes. She would work until her hands calloused and her back ached. She would build a life from nothing but courage and love and determination. Because that life, hard as it sometimes was, had been more valuable than all her father's gold. That life had been rich in all the ways that mattered. That life had been worth everything she had given up and more. As Rebecca Yates Morrison settled into Yates's embrace, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, she smiled and sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the courage that had brought her here, for the man who had seen her worth when no one else did, and for the beautiful, difficult, wonderful life they had built together. She had run from wealth and found riches beyond measure. She had escaped one man's control and found partnership with another. She had left behind everything familiar and discovered exactly who she was meant to be, and in the end, that was the greatest fortune of all. Not the money in the bank or the size of the house or the number of horses in the corral, but the knowledge that she had lived life on her own terms, had chosen her own path, had built something meaningful with her own two hands and the hands of the man she loved. The banker's daughter had run from wealth, and the cowboy had indeed shown her what riches really mean. Love, partnership, freedom, family, work that mattered, a life chosen rather than inherited. These were the treasures that could never be taken away, never lost in a market crash or a business failure. These were the riches that grew rather than diminished over time, that multiplied rather than divided when shared. As the last light faded from the sky and the family began moving inside, Rebecca took one final look at the ranch spread out before her. Every fence post, every corral rail, every stone in the foundation of the house represented work they had done together, dreams they had pursued side by side, challenges they had overcome as partners. "Ready to go in?" Yates asked. "In a moment," Rebecca said. "I just want to remember this. All of it, how lucky we have been." "Lucky," Yates agreed, "but also brave. We made this happen, Rebecca, you and me together." She turned to face him fully, this man who had been her partner for 50 years, and saw in his weathered face the same kindness and strength that had first drawn her to him. His hair was white now, his hands gnarled from decades of work, but his eyes still held that spark of warmth and understanding that had made her feel safe all those years ago. "I love you," she said simply, "for showing me who I could be, for seeing me when no one else did, for building this life with me." "I love you too," Yates replied, "for being brave enough to choose this path, for working beside me all these years, for making me the luckiest man alive." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that spoke of 50 years of partnership and love and mutual respect. Then, hand in hand, they walked back into the house filled with their family, their legacy, their greatest achievement. The banker's daughter had run from wealth and found something infinitely more valuable. She had found herself, found love, found purpose and meaning and joy. She had found a life rich in all the ways that mattered. And that was the happy ending she had chosen, earned, and cherished every single day for the rest of her life. No cliffhangers, no loose ends, just a life well lived and a love that endured. The story of Rebecca and Yates Morrison, partners in every sense of the word, was complete and beautiful and exactly as it was meant to be.